It began with the kind of quiet that presses against your skin, like heat, the kind that fills a room when too much is unsaid and too much has already been felt. I had stayed late to grade essays. The air was still, the hall silent, save for the hum of distant lights and the scratch of my pen against paper. And then there was a knock, soft like a secret asking permission, and before I could speak, he stepped in, eyes dark, an unreadable voice, just above a whisper, asking if I had a moment to talk. Was my student, not just by enrollment, but in every definition of the word, young sharp, eager to learn. But there was always something else behind his gaze, something unspoken, that lingered long after he left my classroom, something that made my breath catch in my throat and my heart drum faster than it should when I read his work. When I saw him walk into the room, when our eyes met just a second too long. He stood there in the doorway, unsure yet determined, and I told myself this was nothing, told myself to remain firm, professional, untouchable, but my voice betrayed me. It softened too much as I told him to come in, as I pushed aside the stack of essays and offered him a seat. He didn't sit. Instead, he leaned against the desk, eyes locked on mine, asking questions about poetry. But the words quickly shifted, became layered, became laced with something else. The way he spoke of longing, of beauty, of unspoken truth. It felt like he wasn't talking about the poem anymore. My hands trembled, and I folded them to hide it. But he noticed. I know he did, because his expression changed, and something in him snapped free, like a tide finally breaking the shore. He stepped closer, the air tightening with every inch he stole. I should have stopped. Him should have stood and drawn a line in the dust. But I didn't. I watched him, like I was dreaming, like the walls around us were no longer real, like the rules I lived by were someone else's words, printed in a book I'd long stopped believing in. And then he touched my wrist gently, hesitantly, as if waiting for me to flinch or pull away. But I didn't. I just let it happen. And in that moment, I forgot I was his teacher. I forgot the title, the years, the boundaries. I let them all fall away, like leaves in autumn, because the way he looked at me made me feel seen. Not as a figure of authority, not as a mentor, but as a woman. Our lips met, not in haste, not in hunger, but in recognition of something that had been building in silence and glances, and the weight of unspoken desire. And when it deepened, when my hand found the back of his neck and his fingers brushed my waist, I felt the line between right and wrong blur into something I could no longer define, and I crossed it willingly, desperately, unapologetical why. The hours that followed were laced in a different kind of silence, one not born from discomfort, but from awe, from disbelief, from the echo of what we had done. I lay beside him in the dim glow of my desk lamp, his shirt crumpled in the corner, his breath steady against my shoulder, and I realized the room that had once held knowledge and structure now carried the scent of us. I traced the edge of the desk absently, as if it could still anchor me to who I was before tonight. But that woman felt distant, like a story I had told myself to feel safe. And now the truth was bared raw and beautiful and terrifying. He whispered my name, not the one on the roster, but the one I had told him once, in passing, when we were still careful, still pretending. And it sounded different now, like a secret turned sacred. And I let him say it again and again, as if each time erased a rule we had broken. He asked if I regretted it, his voice low, his fingers brushing mine, as though afraid the answer would break us, and I couldn't speak for a moment, because regret was too small a word for what I felt. I didn't regret the touch or the kiss, or the way our bodies had found each other like puzzle pieces. Long denied I regretted only that we had waited so longed to admit it, but I also knew the world would not understand. They would see only the scandal, only the breach of ethics and responsibility. They would not care for the softness of our connection, the mutual yearning, the way it felt less like a mistake and more like a release. I rose slowly, pulling on my coat, the clock glowing past midnight, and he watched me with eyes that still burned. And I knew then that this would not be a one-time sin. This was not a moment we could bury. This was the start of something inevitable, something that would demand sacrifice and secrecy. And the kind of strength I wasn't sure I had. He stood and reached for me again, and I let him, his mouth finding mine, with the same reverence and need, and I felt it. Again, that unraveling, that surrender, that terrifying, beautiful fall, and still I didn't stop. 'Cause that night I had crossed a line, but what I had found on the other side was not shame or ruin, but a version of myself I hadn't known was waiting alive, hungry, unbound.